The dawn after Viserys' exile was hushed in Meereen, the sky awash in faint pink clouds that drifted above the Great Pyramid. Daenerys stirred from her bed with a weight in her chest. Relief that her brother was gone, mingled with a raw ache at all she had lost. Still, she pushed forward. The freed confederation's emerging stability demanded she place personal sorrow beneath the higher cause. She found her way to the balcony overlooking Meereen's harbor, letting the morning wind brush her face, driving away lingering fatigue. Down below, freed workers loaded grain sacks onto ships bound for Yunkai and Astapor, their once shackled limbs now free to labor for their own prosperity. Daenerys closed her eyes briefly, recalling the chaos Viserys had threatened. The freed confederation had survived a close brush with sabotage. She thanked whatever gods might listen that House Targaryen's vow to protect these people remained unbroken. By the time she descended to the lower levels, the city already bustled with life. Freed hawkers set up stalls in the courtyard, the aroma of spices, roasting fish, and sweet pastries drifting through the columns. She paused near a cluster of freed scribes who hurried to greet her, each bearing scrolls of proposals or concerns. She acknowledged them with a measured nod. The freed confederation had begun implementing the Tri-City trade pacts hammered out in Astapor, but each day revealed new frictions, from currency exchanges to toll enforcement. Daenerys summoned calm, urging the scribes to gather in the main hall at midday. Meanwhile, she wanted to speak privately with Jon about the next steps. Her brother's name lurked at the back of her mind, but she pushed it aside. He was gone. Best to leave that chapter behind forever. She found Jon in the old audience chamber, wearing plain leathers and a half-cape pinned with a dragon sigil. A freed guard let her in with a polite bow. Jon stood near a wooden table, poring over a crude map of the surrounding region. Light slanted across him from the high windows, casting shadows on his features. Ghost dozed by his boots, ever watchful, half-resurrected eyes flicking open at her approach. Daenerys offered a soft smile. "You're up early." Jon nodded, glancing at her with quiet warmth. "I wanted to review these new caravans we're launching. Our freed confederation can't thrive if bandits pick off travelers the moment they leave Meereen. Dario's second sons patrol some routes and freed militias handle others, but we need a more systematic approach." He paused, letting out a small breath. "Also, I've been thinking about the rumors from beyond our borders. Myr, Lys, even Volantis. Word of a freed confederation in Slaver's Bay must be causing ripples. Some might see opportunities for trade. Others might see us as a threat." Daenerys studied the map, which depicted the eastern coastline, the placid waters of Slaver's Bay, and beyond, the territories of Valyria's ruins and Essosi city-states. "You believe foreign powers might interfere?" she asked quietly, recalling how precarious freed societies could be if a large external force decided to crush them. Jon's expression turned thoughtful. "Not necessarily a full-scale invasion, but we can't discount infiltration. There are wealthy men who prospered from slavery or from the chaos here. Now that we've stabilized Slaver's Bay, those men might resent losing profitable slave markets. Some might try sabotage or sponsor local warlords, just like the infiltration Viserys nearly leveraged. But we're prepared." He set a hand on hers. "And with the freed confederation gaining strength each day, we stand on firmer ground than ever." Daenerys's heart eased a fraction. She clasped his hand, mindful of freed guards at the door, yet unashamed. Their bond no longer needed concealment. Freed men recognized them as co-guardians. She squeezed gently before letting go, stepping to the window that overlooked the city's sprawl. "I suspect Meereen can handle more trade caravans if the roads remain safe. Perhaps we dispatch an envoy to Volantis, inviting legitimate commerce under freed terms, no slavery permitted. If they want to do business, they respect our new laws." Jon folded his arms. "That might indeed quell hostile elements. If Volantis sees a chance for legitimate profit, they might ignore the slaver factions. A cunning approach. Offer them a seat at the table so they don't try to flip it over." She offered a small, weary smile. "Yes, we can do that once we've confirmed our domestic routes are secure. We must also keep an eye on Astapor. It's stable now, but the freed council is young. A single crisis could fracture them again. The memory of near-civil war there made her exhale. At least Yunkai remains calmer, thanks to the freed cavalry we stationed. They moved from the chamber to a side courtyard, exchanging nods with freed scribes who trailed them. A cluster of freedmen waited, each with a request or petition. Daenerys devoted the morning to hearing them out. Small property disputes, complaints about ration lines, appeals for farmland. Jon assisted by asking practical questions, while freed scribes recorded solutions or assigned mediators. By midday, a short break allowed them to meet in a quiet colonnade for water and bread. The sun overhead blazed, though the colonnade's pillars offered a sliver of shade. Ghost lay panting at Jon's feet, exhausted from weaving through throngs. Dario Naharis appeared, flamboyantly striding past freed guards, a grin beneath his dyed mustache. "My queen, my prince," he greeted, inclining his head. "We've tidings from the Second Sons." A minor band of brigands attempted to harass a freed caravan north of Yunkai. They were repelled easily, but we suspect they were part of a larger gang, possibly tied to old slaver groups out of New Guise. He leaned against a pillar. "We can dispatch extra patrols, but it'll stretch us thin." Daenerys arched a brow, glancing at Jon. Another potential front. If these brigands gather more allies, freed caravans could become targets everywhere. She let out a soft groan. "We can't fight 100 small brush fires. We need a broader strategy, either forging alliances with each potential threat or crushing them before they unite. But we don't want to fall into endless wars either. Slavery remains our main enemy, not petty banditry." Jon tapped his chin. "Indeed, but bandits can disrupt free trade, undermine faith in our protection. Let's gather intelligence. Perhaps we approach New Guise with the same approach we planned for Volantis. Offer legitimate trade if they renounce slave practices. If they refuse, we watch them closely. Meanwhile, a few well-placed demonstration flights by Shadowfire or your trio might discourage bandit gatherings." Dario's grin widened. "Always with the show of dragons. I approve. Nothing says, 'Stay away,' like a black behemoth scorching a hilltop near your hideout." Daenerys permitted a small laugh. "All right, coordinate with freed scouts. Let them pinpoint bandit strongholds, if any. A single dragon pass might suffice to scatter them. We'll start with Shadowfire. Then the freed councils can move in to secure the routes." Dario bowed theatrically. "As you wish, my queen. The Second Sons stand ready." He departed in a swirl of dusty cloak, leaving Daenerys and Jon to trade tired but determined glances. After a brief meal, they returned to the freed council sessions in Meereen's halls, adjusting trade laws and reorganizing farmland. The day slipped by in a blur of negotiations. Late in the afternoon, as the sun angled west, a freed scribe hurried to them, breathless. "My queen, a messenger from the coast, urgent. He claims to bring tidings from a Dothraki commissar that roams near the Painted Hills." Daenerys and Jon exchanged startled looks. The Dothraki had thus far avoided direct contact with Slavers Bay since the freed confederation formed. Some warlords might once have sold captured foes into slavery. Now that Targaryens and freed armies dominated these coasts, the Dothraki might be testing the waters. Daenerys nodded to the scribe. "Bring the messenger to the courtyard." They assembled quickly. Torches lit the marble pillars, freed guards forming a perimeter. The messenger, a lanky Dothraki youth, knelt before Daenerys, evidently uneasy to see so many freed soldiers and the looming figure of Jon, who towered behind her. Ghost lurked at Jon's side, baring fangs in a silent intimidation. The youth carried a whip coiled at his hip, though he made no move to draw it. Daenerys recognized the braided hair typical of a Dothraki outrider. She motioned for him to speak, using passable Dothraki phrases to invite him. The youth stumbled into broken Valyrian, explaining that Khal Nakaro commanded a Khalasar of 5,000 riders crossing the Painted Hills, rumored to be heading along the coast. They had run short on water and sought new resources. The youth delivered a message. The Khal inquired whether the Targaryens of Slavers Bay were the same rumored dragonlords who freed cities. If so, Khal Nakaro demanded to know if these Targaryens intended to challenge Dothraki riders in the grasslands or offer tribute. The youth's tone wavered between suspicion and awe. Daenerys listened intently, recalling her own memories of Dothraki culture from years past. She answered softly in Dothraki, "We do not challenge the Dothraki nor pay them tribute. We stand for freed men, not slaves. If Khal Nakaro comes in peace, we will not bar him from passing near the coast. But if he or his riders attempt to raid freed lands or enslave travelers, we will respond with dragons and armies." Jon, following the conversation with partial understanding, added in common tongue, "Tell your Khal we do not fear the Dothraki. If he respects freed rule in Slavers Bay, we might even trade with him. But no plunder, no taking slaves. That is our only condition." The messenger bowed repeatedly, eyes flitting around the courtyard. Freed onlookers murmured, some fearful of Dothraki raids. Others scorned the idea that any Khalasar could match Targaryen dragons. Daenerys dismissed the youth with a measured courtesy, instructing him to convey the terms. "If Khal Nakaro chooses war, he will find us ready," she warned. "If he wishes peaceful passage, we can talk." The youth stumbled out, freed guards escorting him to the city gate. Jon exhaled once the messenger was gone. Another potential front. Let's see if the Dothraki approach. If they do, we stand firm. Daenerys nodded, though tension knitted her brow. 5,000 riders is not trivial. We have dragons, but the freed confederation might be stretched if the Dothraki roam widely. They seldom bow to any outsider. Let's hope they see sense and keep going. The desert near the Painted Hills offers little grazing anyway. Thus, a watchful stance emerged. Freed scouts patrolled the western edges of Slavers Bay, prepared to alert Targaryen leadership if the Khalasar ventured too close. Jon summoned Grey Worm and Tormund to discuss how to handle a possible encounter. Tormund stressed again that freed unity must not waver under fear. If the freed councils unite, a single Khalasar is manageable. Slavery is not the Dothraki's primary way, but they do raid and capture. If they see no easy prey, they may move on. Despite the unsettled news, daily governance proceeded. The Freed Confederation hammered out new guidelines for cross-city apprenticeships, freed labor cooperatives, and farmland reallocation. Daenerys and Jon oversaw each measure, mindful of how quickly a single spark could ignite tension among freed who once were slaves. Their presence, reinforced by the looming menace of dragons, kept the peace. Yet both Targaryens sensed an undercurrent of growing complexity. The Freed Confederation had grown beyond 3 cities. Outlying villages, coastal settlements, and inland farms now recognized Targaryen guardianship. The map of Slavers Bay expanded weekly, freed settlements forging ties, each with unique needs. One afternoon, Daenerys summoned Jon to a small courtyard in the Great Pyramid, a space with neatly tended shrubs and a slender fountain that trickled water across smooth stones. She wore a simple gown of pale blue, her hair braided back from her face. Jon approached, curious why she had asked for a private moment. Freed guards stationed at the archway melted away at her gesture, granting them solitude. Ghosts sprawled on the cool tiles. A hush descended. Daenerys paced near the fountain, turning to Jon with an intensity in her violet eyes. "I needed to speak away from prying ears," she began softly. "We have managed so much, freed confederation, new trade routes, quelling internal strife. But sometimes I feel the realm we've built teeters on a fragile foundation. Without constant vigilance, freed societies could devolve or be subverted. I never intended to stay forever as a caretaker." Jon understood. Nor did I. Yet each day, freed councils rely on us. If we vanish, who holds the realm together? Eventually, freed leaders must stand on their own, but they're still new to governance. Another year or 2 might be needed, at minimum, to cement these structures. Then we can step back, unless a bigger threat arises. She nodded, leaning a hand on the fountain's rim. "I fear that day might come from the east or west. The Dothraki, foreign slaver alliances, or even Westeros if King Robert decides we threaten his claims. But let's not wallow in paranoia. We can only plan so much. She paused, voice trembling slightly. And what of us? We share a Targaryen bond, but also something deeper. I feel it whenever we stand together. Freedmen whisper we are king and queen in all but name. Yet we've not named any titles for ourselves. We champion the freed. Are we content with that? Jon's heart pounded. He stepped closer, letting the faint trickle of water mask the hush in the courtyard. We are more than content, I think. We told the freed we were no tyrants. If they name us protectors, that's enough for me. But if you ask about personal ties, yes, I feel that closeness. We do not need a formal ceremony to acknowledge it. But if you wish it, I won't deny you. She swallowed, the warmth of her hand brushing his. It's not only about a ceremony. The freed suspect were bound by more than leadership. They accept it, even bless it. Targaryen tradition once had no qualms with close-kin marriages, but we've tried to reject the worst of those old ways. Still, she trailed off, searching his face. I find myself wanting to stand at your side not just as co-guardian, but as partner in every sense. Perhaps we let freed be freed in love, as we are freed from taboos. Jon's breath caught, a gentle surge of emotion. Then let us not fear old judgments. We shape a new realm with new norms. If the freed see no scandal in it, and if it binds us stronger, we can formalize our bond. But only if it feels right to you, Daenerys. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with a faint smile. It does. Let the freed see that House Targaryen is united in every way. We can proclaim it in a freed manner, not a pompous coronation. Something simple, a vow acknowledging we guide these lands together. She exhaled, relieved to have voiced it. But not immediately. We must ensure the freed confederation thrives. Then we might hold a small ceremony, if you agree. Jon's answering smile was gentle. I do. Let's call it a freed vow, something the councils can celebrate. Then the realm will see that Targaryen leadership is stable, one body, one spirit. I was never one for grand feasts anyway. He reached for her hand, interlacing fingers. For a heartbeat, they shared a quiet closeness unburdened by the swirl of politics. A sudden flurry of footsteps broke the moment. A freed guard rushed in, out of breath, apologizing for the intrusion. My queen, my prince, pardon me, but there's an urgent message from the Painted Hills scouts. The Dothraki Khalasar is moving closer to the coastal roads. They might test freed border villages. Daenerys's jaw tightened. She squeezed Jon's hand once before releasing it. So it begins, she muttered. We'll handle this as well. Summon Dario, Grey Worm, the Freed Council. Let's see if Khal Nakaro truly wants a fight or just a show of force. The guard bowed and dashed off. Daenerys sighed, turning to Jon. We'll not mention our vow plan until we settle this. One crisis at a time. Jon nodded, face set. Agreed. Let's hope the Dothraki stand down. They left the courtyard for the council hall, footsteps echoing along the polished stone. Ghost padded behind, tail flicking. The memory of their tender discussion lingered in Jon's mind, fueling resolve to preserve the freed confederation from any new threat. The Freed Council convened swiftly, freed scribes bringing in scouts reports. A Khalasar of about 5,000 riders, led by Khal Nakaro, had advanced within a day's ride of the Painted Hills near the southwestern coast. Freed farmland dotted that region, small villages of ex-slaves who once fled from Yunkai's oppression. If the Khalasar raided these unfortified settlements, the Freed Confederation would face its first major external conflict. Daenerys listened gravely. Jon studied the scribes' accounts of Khal Nakaro's rumored temperament. Proud, quick to seize easy plunder, but not mindlessly cruel. He might be swayed by a demonstration of overwhelming might. Dario tapped the table, proposing that the Second Sons ride out to reinforce those villages, while Daenerys or Jon soared overhead with a dragon as a deterrent. Torm recommended sending a small diplomatic party first, repeating their stance. The Freed Confederation welcomes peaceful trade or passage, but no raiding or slavery. Grey Worm favored a show of unsullied force as well. Freed counselors worried that if negotiations failed, The Dothraki could vanish into the plains or return unpredictably. Daenerys and Jon conferred, eventually deciding on a dual approach. Daenerys would dispatch an envoy to meet Khal Nakaro, while Jon soared above on Shadowfire, ready to rain fire if the Dothraki attacked. Freed cavalry from Yunkai, now well-trained, would circle the Painted Hills, ensuring the villages had time to evacuate if needed. They left Meereen at dawn, a lean force of freed cavalry and second sons. Daenerys rode at the column's center, Drogon perched on a wooden enclosure in the supply wagon. Rhaegal and Viserion flitted overhead, scanning the dunes. Jon flew ahead on Shadowfire, scouting for signs of the Khalasar. Ghost remained with Daenerys, the direwolf trotting beside her horse. Freed watchers fanned out to secure possible choke points. After 2 days of travel under scorching sun, they reached the Painted Hills outskirts, rolling mounds tinted by mineral streaks of red, purple, and gold. Local freed peasants peeked fearfully from huts, reporting that no direct raid had occurred yet, but a vast cloud of dust signaled Dothraki riders camped just over the horizon. They set up a base near a small ravine that offered water. Daario led a scouting party that discovered a Dothraki outrider. He returned with news that Khal Nakaro had pitched his main camp near the coastal track, presumably hunting or waiting for an approach. Daenerys resolved to ride out with a few freed translators, plus minimal guard, to parley. Jon insisted on circling from above, ready to swoop in. Everyone agreed the Dothraki might respond poorly to a large show of ground force, interpreting it as a challenge. But a black dragon overhead might curb aggression. Thus, at dawn, Daenerys set forth with half a dozen freed cavalry, Daario among them, plus a freed translator Profi. Scient in Dothraki, she carried Drogon on a makeshift chain, though the young dragon had grown larger, nearing the size of a small horse. Rhaegal and Viserion soared overhead, trailing behind Jon and Shadowfire's black silhouette. The Painted Hills glimmered in the dawn light. Drifts of dust whipped around them. Tension crackled. They spotted the Dothraki camp as they crested a shallow ridge. Thousands of horses grazed on the sparse grass. Lean tents and smoky fires formed a ring. Men roamed with curved rocks. Women and children glimpsed the Targaryen approach with curiosity or wariness. Khal Nakaro emerged, mounted on a tall, sinewy stallion, flanked by a coterie of blood riders. His hair was braided with bells that chimed softly in the breeze. He wore leather vests, arms bare, a rack resting at his hip. When he saw Daenerys, silver-haired, accompanied by a small retinue, a black and red banner fluttering, his nostrils flared. He barked something in Dothraki that the freed translator murmured. He acknowledges your arrival, wonders if you come to beg or to threaten. Daenerys raised her voice in passable Dothraki. I am Daenerys Targaryen, breaker of chains, freer of cities in Slaver's Bay. I come neither to beg nor threaten without cause. We respect the Dothraki, but we will not tolerate raids on freed lands. If you pass peacefully, there is no quarrel. Khal Nakaro let out a dry laugh, leaning forward in his saddle. He responded in a torrent of Dothraki, the translator struggling to keep up. He says the Dothraki roam where they please. He has heard tales of Targaryen dragons. Rumor claims you destroyed slavers. He does not trade in slaves, but he claims the right to take spoils from weak villages. If these freed are truly strong, let them defend themselves. If not, they are rightful prey. Daenerys's jaw tightened. Then you believe might makes right, Khal Nakaro? We do not forbid your passage, but we forbid taking freed people as spoils. We have dragons overhead. Challenge us at your peril. On cue, a roar echoed from above. Shadowfire swooped in broad circles, blotting out the sun. Rhaegal and Viserion soared behind, smaller but fierce. Many Dothraki reined in horses with startled exclamations. The sight of 4 dragons patrolling the skies unsettled them. The camp stirred, men brandishing rocks in confusion. Khal Nakaro's eyes flicked skyward, betraying a moment of awe. Still, he let out a contemptuous sniff. He says a single beast can be killed with cunning. Perhaps not so easily, but the Dothraki do not fear illusions. Daenerys bristled. She lifted a hand, motioning for Dario to remain calm. The freed cavalry around her tensed, but she pressed forward in a firm voice, continuing in Dothraki. We have freed armies as well. The entire bay stands behind us. If you doubt it, test us and see how your Khalasar fares against dragons in the open desert. I do not wish war. We can trade food, water. We allow you passage if you do not raid freed villages. That is all we ask. Khal Nakaro sneered, exchanging words with his blood riders. The freed translator whispered. He mocks the idea that Targaryens can keep so many freed in line. He says freed are easily scattered, but he acknowledges the dragons might burn them. He wonders if you would risk your own freed for a Dothraki test. Daenerys stared him down. If you question freed resolve, look at the charred remains of slaver cities we conquered. Freed marched with me thousands strong. I have no desire to kill Dothraki, but I will if you threaten my realm. She jerked the chain slightly, letting Drogon hiss a small flame from his jaws. The swirl of heat rippled through the dusty air. Dothraki horses danced nervously. Khal Nakaro's eyes narrowed. A hush fell, broken only by the rustle of the painted hill's wind. From above, Jon observed, perched on Shadowfire. He studied the tension below, prepared to dive if the Dothraki advanced. Rhaegal and Viserion flitted near him, awaiting a signal from Daenerys. The freed cavalry formed a half-circle, uneasy but resolute. Khal Nakaro regarded them with tight-lipped disdain. Finally, he barked an order to his men. The translator relayed. He says the Dothraki do not bow to your freed laws, but he sees no point in a fool's fight with so many dragons. He will pass along the coastline, taking only what the land offers. Grass for horses, water from streams. He will not raid freed villages if they do not provoke him. That is his final word. Daenerys exhaled, letting relief seep in. So be it. If your men harm freed or take them captive, we will respond swiftly and ruthlessly. If you keep your word, we part with no bloodshed. She nodded to Dario and the freed cavalry, signaling they were done. Khal Nakaro spat on the ground, turning his stallion abruptly. The Dothraki parted to let him pass, some glaring with naked hostility, others uncertain. The tension lingered, but the immediate confrontation diffused. Daenerys beckoned Drogon, soothing him. The freed cavalry carefully backed away, leaving the painted hills open for the Khalasar's travel. The translator muttered that Khal Nakaro might well keep his vow out of caution, though the Dothraki might test freed settlements from a distance. When Daenerys regrouped with Jon on a nearby ridge, she let out a shaky breath. He yields for now. A direct fight was avoided. Jon helped her dismount, scanning the broad desert where thousands of Dothraki prepared to move on. We'll remain vigilant, station freed scouts. If the Dothraki remain peaceful, fine. If they break their word, we respond with fire. He glanced at Daenerys' face, seeing the strain there. You did well. Another crisis averted. But we must be prepared for more. She nodded, weary. Yes, this freed confederation is no child's toy. We face threats from Dothraki, from hidden slavers, from possible foreign city-states. Each time we hold them at bay, I wonder how long we can keep every wolf from our door. But each day freed societies grow stronger, more organized, better able to defend themselves. Jon placed a reassuring hand on her arm. That's all we can do. Buy them time, shape stable governance. Eventually, freed men can stand without us. Then, he hesitated, remembering their vow talk. Then we chart our next path. Returning to Meereen, they reported the outcome to the Freed Council, who breathed relief that war with the Dothraki had been avoided. Scouts were deployed to monitor Khal Nakaro's progress along the coast. Meanwhile, freed caravans resumed normal travel. The freed city folk hailed Daenerys and Jon as protectors once more, praising their willingness to stand tall without sparking a needless war. Tormund commended them for exemplifying mercy matched by strength. Dario teased that Slaver's Bay had become so stable that the Second Sons might grow bored. Yet everyone sensed that the region's stability was fragile, reliant on Targaryen oversight and the freed confederation's newfound cooperation. In the ensuing weeks, freed commerce flourished. Ships plied the bay, exchanging goods between the three main cities and smaller ports that sprang up. Freed farmland around Meereen and Yunkai produced healthy harvests, supplemented by fish from Astapor's coast. Minor tensions arose. A freed counselor in Astapor complained that Yunkai's port fees were too high, while some freed families in Meereen accused others of hoarding. Each time, Daenerys or Jon intervened, calmly mediating. The freed confederation learned step by step, forging solutions without fists or whips. The dragons soared overhead, a constant reminder that House Targaryen guarded their liberties. Meanwhile, Daenerys and Jon quietly made plans for a freed vow ceremony, a personal union that would double as a symbolic anchor for the confederation. They intended a modest affair, inviting freed council delegates from each city, some red priests, and the essential defense leaders. No pomp of gold crowns or forced tributes, merely an affirmation that the Targaryens who broke chains were united also in heart. A freed craftsman prepared simple silver bands engraved with swirling dragon motifs, a subtle sign. Daenerys confided to a handful of freed scribes that the ceremony would occur at dawn, in a courtyard near Meereen's harbor. The scribes, delighted, shared discreetly with freed leaders, who took care to arrange a respectful but not ostentatious gathering. When the appointed morning came, the sky was a soft lavender hue. Freed men and women gathered at Meereen's harbor in a loose circle, each holding small candles or torches, forming a gentle ring of light. The sea lapped at the docks, while gulls cried overhead. Rhaegal and Viserion perched on a tall column, watchful. Drogon circled above, letting out occasional chirps. Shadowfire soared in the distance, a dark shape that cast long shadows across the bay. Tormund led a short invocation in both Common Tongue and Valyrian, calling on R'hlloreth's flame to bless this union. Freed counselors from Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen stood close, wearing plain robes, their faces lit by torchlight. Dario, Grey Worm, and a smattering of second sons watched from the periphery, quiet respect in their eyes. Daenerys wore a pale ivory dress, unembellished except for a faint red trim reminiscent of House Targaryen's sigil. Her hair was partly braided, the rest flowing free. She stood in the harbor's gentle breeze, hands clasped at her waist, eyes bright with anticipation. Jon approached from the crowd's other side, wearing leathers dyed a subtle crimson hue. Ghost padded beside him, fur still patchy from resurrection scars. The freed parted silently, letting him pass. He paused at the circle's center, meeting Daenerys's gaze with quiet resolve. No formal speech had been prepared. They had agreed to speak from the heart. Tormund nodded, stepping back to let them define the moment. Daenerys drew in a steadying breath. We began as strangers, bastard and exile, uncertain of the world that had cast us aside. But we found purpose in breaking chains, forging freed unity. Through battles, heartbreak, and triumph, we stood side by side. This day, I stand before freed men, proclaiming that House Targaryen is more than blood ties. It is a pledge to defend, to nurture, and to love. Jon, I vow to face every storm with you, to uphold freed confederation, and to walk with you in every dawn. Jon's throat tightened, hearing the sincerity in her voice. Freed watchers stood in hush, some blinking away tears. He took her hand. Daenerys, you gave me a calling beyond my own doubts, liberating enslaved souls, guiding them to shape a realm of their own. We are guardians shaped by dragons, by freed hopes, by each other. I vow to stand at your side, forging peace through justice, never forsaking these people or you. Let freed be freed, and let us be free in our bond. He turned to Tormund, who presented 2 thin silver bands. Daenerys lifted the first band, slipping it onto Jon's left hand, the metal cool against his skin. He did the same for her, the ring sliding over her slender finger. A breathless hush lingered, followed by a ripple of cheers as freed recognized the union of their 2 protectors. Tormund quietly declared them bound in R'hlloreth's light and freed grace, though he did not overshadow the moment with a sermon. Daenerys and Jon sealed the vow with a gentle kiss, brief, respectful, but filled with unspoken devotion. Freed watchers clapped, some chanting Mysa, Mysa, while others intoned Jon's name in lesser-known freed tongues. Drogon soared low, releasing a small jet of flame that lit the sky in gold sparks. Rhaegal and Viserion joined, swirling overhead. From the harbor's far edge, Shadowfire let out a thunderous roar, echoing across Meereen's battlements, as though blessing the vow with primeval power. Freed men who once quaked at the notion of dragons now cheered, seeing these creatures as allies. The harbor glowed in the early sun, unveiling a day that promised unity. In the hours that followed, freed councils from each city offered simple gifts: carved tokens representing Astapor's fisheries, Yunkai's textiles, Meereen's farmland. Each gift symbolized the freed confederation's trust in Targaryen leadership. Daenerys accepted them graciously, reminding everyone that these tokens belonged to the freed cause, not as personal tribute. Jon shared a modest feast with freed counselors, second sons, and unsullied officers. Laughter abounded, though subdued. No drunken revelry overshadowed the seriousness of the vow. The freed confederation needed them strong and clear-eyed. By dusk, the vow day concluded. Daenerys and Jon found a rare moment of calm in a chamber high in the pyramid. Windows opened to the desert wind. Torchlight danced across the walls. Their new silver bands glinted on their fingers, an outward sign of what they already knew in their hearts. Ghost dozed at the threshold, while Drogon perched on a ledge, half-dozing. Rhaegal and Viserion took flight over the city. Daenerys approached Jon with a soft smile, her eyes reflecting the torch's glow. "We're no king and queen in the old sense," she said, voice low. "Yet the freed see us as something akin to it. I trust we can remain just and never repeat our forebears' sins." Jon slid an arm around her waist. "We lead by example. Freed see that we champion them, not ourselves. The vow we made only strengthens that bond. We're in this together." He pressed a gentle kiss to her brow, content that, after so much turmoil, they had carved out a small piece of happiness. Outside, a hush fell across Meereen streets as freed families settled into their nightly routines. Beyond the walls, the painted hills, Astapor, Yunkai all lay under Targaryen watch. For the first time in ages, Daenerys allowed herself to feel hope that the freed confederation might truly endure. The next day brought routine freed governance. Daenerys and Jon awakened early, greeting freed scribes who delivered tidings from each city. Astapor reported further improvements in farmland distribution. Yunkai had apprehended a small band of slaver loyalists. Meereen's shipping lanes thrived. Torum's red priests continued traveling, fostering unity. Dario's men patrolled the roads. It seemed, at last, that Slaver's Bay had found a rhythm of peace. Freed families found stable homes, each city forging its identity free of whips and chains. Weeks passed in measured calm, each day a chance to refine freed laws, integrate new farmland, or quell minor feuds. Daenerys and Jon used their vow to encourage freed councils that Targaryen leadership was steadfast. Freed children played in the plazas, building small figurines of dragons and direwolves from clay. The caravans to the Painted Hills reported no further Dothraki aggression. Khal Nakaro had continued north, uninterested in tangling with the mighty freed confederation. Rumors from the west suggested some ex-slavers wandered the Basilisk Isles, but they posed no immediate threat. Gradually, Daenerys and Jon dared believe that an era of relative stability might blossom. Freed commerce boomed, with shipping routes expanding to the Summer Islands and possibly Volantis. Word spread. The freed confederation was open for trade but forbade any cargo of slaves. Some foreign merchants balked. Others found lucrative new markets in the revived economy. Meanwhile, the freed cities built small navies to protect their shores, each vessel bearing the three-headed dragon entwined with the broken chain sigil that had emerged as a freed emblem. One afternoon, as Daenerys busied herself with freed scribes in Meereen's main hall, Jon stepped outside for fresh air. Ghost followed, panting in the late-day sun. He found Shadowfire coiled on a broad terrace above the harbor, dozing. The monstrous black dragon stirred at Jon's approach, releasing a puff of sulphurous breath. Jon rested a hand on the scaled flank, remembering the day he discovered that old egg beneath Winterfell. Fate had led them here, forging a path of flame that lit the freed Confederation's birth. He thought of Daenerys, her vow, her unwavering devotion to these ex-slaves, the gentle strength that defied fear. A faint smile tugged at his lips. They had done what seemed impossible. Unify 3 war-torn cities, break thousands of chains, and stand watch over a realm that grew more stable each moon cycle. Perhaps one day, if the freed needed them less, they might turn their gaze west, or remain here in contentment. Suddenly, footsteps echoed on the terrace. Daario arrived, an unusual tension in his posture. His flamboyant grin was absent. "Jon," he said in a clipped voice, "I come with unexpected tidings. A ship arrived from Westeros. The freed harbor guards flagged it as suspicious, but its captain claims to bear a message from Ned Stark, Hand of the King, addressed to House Targaryen in Meereen. The freed scribes are verifying authenticity." Jon's heartbeat quickened. He had not received direct news from Ned Stark in ages, though he gleaned bits from small rumors. "A letter from Ned Stark to us? That is surprising. Let's see it." They hurried down flights of stone steps to the harbor's small administration building, freed guards posted outside. The dock beyond was alive with workers loading fish and grain. Inside, a freed scribe handed Jon a sealed parchment. The seal bore the direwolf of House Stark, unbroken. Daario stepped aside, letting Jon open it in privacy. The letter's contents were brief, penned in a sure, firm hand. "Jon, if this reaches you, then the rumors are true. You stand in Essos with Daenerys Targaryen, forging new dominions. I have belatedly learned of your heritage, how you are more Targaryen than Stark by birth, and of the monstrous dragons you command. I write not to condemn, but to warn. King Robert's court stirs with uneasy whispers. Some suspect you and Daenerys pose a threat to the Iron Throne. I have thus far counseled caution, reminding the king we have no proof of your hostile intent. But his advisors press him to consider drastic measures. A new hand might not be so patient. I also learned unsettling rumors from the far north, tales of undead rising beyond the wall. Madness, perhaps, but the Night's Watch calls it reason for concern. Winter may come for us all. If you can maintain peace in Essos, do so. War with Westeros would only distract from the greater threat. I cannot say more in a mere letter. Tread carefully. Ned Stark." Jon's breath caught. The letter validated that Ned Stark had known some truth of his parentage but kept it hidden. The mention of undead beyond the wall tugged at old fears. He considered Robert's potential hostility. The freed Confederation might soon attract more unwelcome attention from the Iron Throne. Folding the parchment, he told Daario, "Send this to Daenerys at once. She must read it. We'll confer in private." Daario nodded, beckoning freed guards to carry the letter to the pyramid's main hall. Within the hour, Daenerys, Jon, and a select few freed leaders convened in a small side chamber. Tormund stood discreetly aside, hands folded. Daario hovered near the door, watchful. Daenerys read the letter in tense silence, her brow furrowing. She lifted her gaze to Jon, a swirl of worry in her violet eyes. "So Westeros stirs. King Robert's court contemplates action against us. I thought them distant, content to ignore rumors. But perhaps not forever." Jon set a hand on the table. Ned Stark's letter suggests no immediate invasion, but Robert's advisors are pressing him. He warns us to avoid hostility that might provoke a strike. Also, he speaks of undead beyond the wall. That's a legend I once scoffed at in Winterfell, but if Ned includes it, it might be more than myth. Could it be the threat the Red Priests whispered about in their old prophecies? Ice and fire clashing. Daenerys's features hardened. "I recall some old tales from Rhaegar's notes about a coming darkness in the north. Perhaps that darkness stirs. Meanwhile, Robert might move against us. If we remain here and do nothing, could Westeros strike our freed confederation? Or do we parley to avoid a pointless war?" Tormund inclined his head. "Lawloress flame sometimes shows glimpses of ice wraiths. but whether they truly stir or not is uncertain. If Westeros's Iron Throne sees you as a threat, they might conspire with slavers or other factions to weaken Slavers Bay. We must prepare. Dario tapped his dagger's hilt. If King Robert tries sending fleets across the narrow sea, we'd see them coming. Dragons could burn them. The freed confederation is strong, but a war might hamper all we've built. We'd prefer peace if possible. Daenerys nodded. Yes, war with Westeros could destroy freed unity. Our caravans would be disrupted. Foreign allies might exploit chaos. Perhaps we write back to Lord Stark, clarifying we do not seek to invade. Offer some assurance that Freed Bay stands separate from Westeros unless threatened. She glanced at Jon. We can't be sure Robert will heed reason, but it's worth trying. Jon exhaled, heart heavy. Agreed. We can also mention the rumored undead threat. If that's real, we all have bigger concerns than cross-sea conflict. Let's see if Ned can mediate, though I fear Robert's temper. We have to remain vigilant. The freed confederation must not collapse under external pressure. Daenerys resolved to compose a measured response. She dictated an open letter to Ned Stark, reaffirming that House Targaryen stands in Essos, forging freed societies with no intention of launching an invasion of Westeros. She pointed out the moral difference between building a realm of ex-slaves and claiming an ancestral throne across the sea. She added a note urging cooperation if the undead rumors proved true, for no realm could stand alone if such a threat stirred. The freed scribes penned this letter swiftly, sealing it with Daenerys' sigil entwined with a broken chain. Dario arranged a ship to sail west, hopefully finding a friendly port in Westeros to deliver it to Ned Stark's hands. In the days that followed, Daenerys and Jon maintained normal freed governance but remained on alert. Scouts scanned the horizon for any sign of foreign fleets or infiltration. Freed city life continued, forging new markets and cultural expressions. Even the painted hills saw Dothraki footprints fade as Khal Nakaro indeed passed on. Freed caravans resumed, shipping goods to the far corners of Essos. The freed confederation's unity appeared robust, each city counseling the others. House Targaryen soared overhead, a watchful presence. Yet the letter from Ned Stark lingered in Daenerys' mind, a reminder that across the narrow sea, uncertain storm clouds might gather. Amid these shifting complexities, life in Meereen carried on. Freed families built permanent homes in once-abandoned slaver mansions, the old structures repurposed into communal dwellings. Freed orphans studied at small schools Daenerys funded, taught by scribes who once served unscrupulous masters. Freed artisans carved new monuments celebrating the chainbreakers, while freed farmers sold surplus grain in busy markets. Dragons soared in the sky each morning, greeted by cheers from children who idolized them as symbols of liberation. Jon worked tirelessly, traveling among the freed councils to ensure daily disputes never festered. Daenerys oversaw broader policy, shaping laws that banned all forms of forced labor. Tormund blessed them with quiet prayers, rousing freed hearts that a new dawn truly shone on Slavers Bay. One late afternoon, Daenerys found Jon at the city's main gate, observing a column of freed cavalry returning from a routine patrol. Ghost perched near him, blinking in the bright sun. She dismounted from her horse, approaching with a warm look. "All calm, I trust?" Jon turned, offering a faint grin. "Yes, the freed cavalry found no threats. The roads are quiet. It's almost strange to see such peace. I keep expecting another crisis." She stepped closer, letting the city's noise fall away. "We've learned to expect turmoil at every turn, but perhaps we've earned a season of calm. Enough to breathe." She paused, glancing at the freed cavalry who dismounted, exchanging cheerful banter with passing vendors. "Though I suspect we must remain watchful." Jon placed a hand on her waist, a small sign of the closeness Freed had grown used to seeing. "We will, but let's also appreciate how far we've come. Astapor stable, Yunkai stable, Meereen thriving. A freed vow sealed between us. We might even call it success." Daenerys' lips curved in a gentle smile. "Success that cost blood and tears. But yes, success. Our freed confederation stands." Even a potential Dothraki raid dissolved. The letters to Westeros may or may not avert trouble, but we can't do more from here. Let King Robert stew in his doubts. If he leaves us be, so be it. Jon's gaze flicked to the horizon. One day we might cross the sea or face that rumored undead threat. But for now, Freed Bay is our realm. Let's guard it well. They walked side by side into the city's bustle, freed folk parting to let them pass. Children waved, calling out in various tongues. Dragons soared overhead, regal and Viserion weaving patterns, while Drogon streaked after them with sharper cries. Shadowfire, more solitary, often perched beyond the walls, content to let the smaller dragons frolic over the rooftops. Daenerys and Jon returned to the pyramid, greeted by scribes who reported new trade caravans departing for Volantis, hopeful for peaceful commerce. The freed confederation indeed extended its influence beyond Slaver's Bay. The world was changing, shaped by Targaryen flame and freed resilience. In the weeks that followed, the freed confederation grew more confident. Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen each fortified small freed militias, standardizing training under the Unsullied's guidance. Freed councils established rotating delegates to meet monthly in Meereen, ensuring decisions were shared. Food surpluses circulated, diminishing hunger. Freed engineers repaired old aqueducts left from Valyrian times. Ships from the Summer Islands docked peacefully, exchanging exotic fruits for crafted wares. The freed confederation thrived as a beacon of liberty in Essos, overshadowing old slaver nightmares. Daenerys and Jon found time to fulfill their freed vow further. Each city they visited held modest ceremonies welcoming them as guardians. Freed mothers offered them small tokens of gratitude. Freed children performed songs in newly minted freed tongues. Some red priests proclaimed Daenerys and Jon as embodiments of a prophecy that merged dragon blood with righteous purpose. Tormund cautioned humility, which they embraced. They did not claim to be gods, only defenders of freed. The days blurred into a steady rhythm of governance, patrols, and incremental reforms. For once, no crisis loomed on the immediate horizon. Then, on a crisp morning near the end of the harvest season, a rider arrived from Astapor, dusty and exhausted. Daenerys and Jon, alerted at once, met the man in a side courtyard of the Great Pyramid. He gasped out tidings. Travelers from the Basilisk Isles had landed in the swamps south of Astapor. Rumors circulated that these travelers included sellswords and shady merchants who might harbor slaver ties. Freed scouts reported seeing small, fast ships hugging the coastline, possibly conducting clandestine dealings. The freed in those parts felt uneasy, suspecting an infiltration or a new threat. The Basilisk Isles were infamous for pirate dens, rumored to deal in contraband, including slaves. If these pirates forged alliances with local ex-slaver factions, trouble could spread quickly. Jon and Daenerys exchanged weary glances. Another potential brushfire. The freed confederation was too large for them to respond personally to every incursion, yet ignoring it could embolden foes. Daenerys promptly convened a freed council session, inviting Tormund, Dario, Grey Worm, and key scribes. They mapped the southern coastline, identifying the swampland near Astapor's southern outskirts. Freed settlement there was sparse, but any infiltration threatened a vulnerable region. Dario recommended sending a squad of Second Sons to investigate. Grey Worm proposed freed scouts from Astapor's militia, with some Unsullied as backup. Jon suggested a demonstration flight by the dragons to spook any pirates. Daenerys concurred. They formed a plan. Dispatch freed cavalry from Astapor to the swamps, while a small detachment of Unsullied from Meereen joined them. If the Basilisk Isles travelers were harmless merchants, they would present legitimate cargo and cooperate. If they harbored slaver designs or contraband, they would face immediate expulsion or arrest. A quick show of Targaryen dragons might deter them from resisting. The next dawn, Daenerys and Jon parted ways. She stayed in Meereen to maintain day-to-day freed governance, while Jon soared south on Shadowfire with a handful of freed scribes and cavalry riding behind. He carried a letter from Daenerys authorizing him to act in the freed confederation's name. Within days, Jon arrived in Astapor, reacquainting himself with the freed council there. They greeted him warmly, relieved to see House Targaryen respond swiftly. Freed scouts confirmed that small ships from the Basilisk Isles lurked near the swampy shoreline, rumored to anchor by night. Some freed peasants reported glimpses of armed men with shady bearing, though no overt raids yet. Jon mustered a force. Freed cavalry from Astapor, a squad of Unsullied, and a smattering of local freed volunteers who knew the swamps. Shadowfire circled overhead, casting vast shadows across the red brick walls. Freed onlookers watched, heartened. They set out at dawn for the swampy region, riding through dense, humid terrain. The land smelled of brackish water and rotting vegetation. Crocodiles slithered in the murky shallows. Freed scouts guided them along causeways. Ghost padded carefully, nose twitching at the pungent scents. Jon found it oppressive but pressed on. By midday, they spotted a faint column of smoke rising from behind a copse of twisted trees. Creeping forward, they discovered a makeshift camp of about 20 men, armed with cutlasses and crossbows, plus a few battered tents. Several rowboats were moored at a hidden inlet. The men wore mismatched attire, some with Basilisk Isles tattoos. A freed scout pointed to crates stashed near the boats, possibly containing contraband. Jon signaled a stealthy approach. Freed cavalry dismounted, Unsullied formed ranks, using thick reeds as cover. Ghost hunkered low, tension in every muscle. Jon, astride Shadowfire overhead, let out a single roar to announce their presence. The camp erupted in startled shouts. Men scrambled for weapons. Freed cavalry, led by an Astapori captain, emerged from the undergrowth, shouting that they represented House Targaryen and freed Confederation authority. One pirate fired a crossbow at a freed soldier, narrowly missing. That was enough provocation. Jon guided Shadowfire in a low pass, unleashing a jet of flame across the swampy edge. Steam hissed as water boiled, igniting a corner of the brush. The pirates panicked, dropping their crossbows to flee. Freed cavalry charged, subduing them swiftly. A handful tried to race to the rowboats, but Unsullied spears blocked the path. Within minutes, the scuffle ended. The pirates lay bound, cursing in a mix of Common Tongue and Basilisk Isles dialects. Freed scribes rummaged through their crates, discovering illicit goods, cheap swords, suspicious potions, possibly items meant for sale to ex-slavers. No direct evidence of slavery, but it reeked of illegal dealings. Jon landed Shadowfire in the clearing, the impact sending mud splattering. Freed cavalry parted for him. Ghost prowled at his side, baring teeth. The captured pirates trembled at the sight of the monstrous black dragon, some whimpering. Jon approached the one who appeared to be their leader, a wiry man with a serpent tattoo across his neck. He demanded an explanation for their presence. The man spat, claiming they sought legitimate trade with Freed. But the crates suggested otherwise. Freed scribes found half-finished manacles and documents referencing secret deals. It was enough to brand them conspirators in potential slaver resurgences. They had no official trade permit from the Freed Confederation. Jon declared them under arrest. Freed cavalry took them in chains, ironic justice for men who might have trafficked in slavery. They would face a freed tribunal in Astapor for contraband smuggling, possibly conspiring to re-establish the trade in human lives. Freed scribes burned their camp, scattering any chance of them returning. Shadowfire's presence alone silenced their protests. The swamp settlement was dismantled, the rowboats confiscated. Over the next days, Freed patrols scoured the coastline for other hidden camps. Some pirates might have fled by sea, but any hope of infiltration had been dashed by the swift Targaryen response. News reached the freed councils that once again, House Targaryen had preserved freed lands from creeping slaver influence. Returning to Astapor, Jon convened a quick trial for the pirates. Freed counselors presided, freed scribes detailing their crimes. The men were found guilty of illegal infiltration, conspiracy to supply slaver gear. Sentences ranged from forced labor in freed quarries to outright banishment across the sea. Jon oversaw the process, mindful not to overshadow freed authority. The freed council appreciated his fairness. In the aftermath, freed watchers strengthened coastal surveillance, determined never to let a band of pirates slip in so easily again. Word spread across Slavers Bay that Targaryen guardians were as vigilant as ever. When Jon finally returned to Meereen, Daenerys awaited him in the palace courtyard with a relieved smile, freed leaders at her side. He dismounted from Shadowfire, letting freed attendants cool the dragon with water. She walked up, ignoring protocol to embrace him before freed onlookers. A hush of approval rippled among them. The freed confederation needed no pomp. They simply recognized their guardians reuniting. Ghosts circled them, tail wagging. Daenerys asked about the basilisk pirates, which he explained had been subdued. No direct sign of slavery, Jon said, but they carried enough contraband to suggest an agenda. Freed coastal watchers will remain on high alert. Daenerys sighed. Another threat stamped out. Good. The freed councils heard rumor of the incident, but thanks to your swift action, no chaos erupted. Now, if only every crisis can be handled so decisively. Her eyes gleamed with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Jon lowered his voice so freed bystanders wouldn't overhear. We manage day by day. The freed confederation stands. That's what matters. If King Robert or foreign slavers test us, they'll find we remain vigilant. She nodded, heart full. Freed men parted, letting them pass. The pair climbed the steps to the Great Pyramid's main hall, sharing quiet updates. Torches flickered in sconces, revealing freed scribes bustling with daily tasks. A freed scribe approached, presenting a fresh letter from Ned Stark. Daenerys raised her brows, exchanging a glance with Jon. The scribe excused himself, leaving them alone at a side alcove. Jon carefully broke the seal, reading silently. Targaryens, your letter reached me. I see you wish no war. King Robert remains uncertain, but I have persuaded him that immediate aggression would be folly. Cersei's faction might yet stir trouble. I cannot guarantee they won't attempt covert sabotage. For now, the realm is preoccupied with internal matters. Concerning the undead threat, the Night's Watch has requested additional men. Rumors persist of unnatural occurrences beyond the wall. I cannot confirm them fully, but caution is wise. I advise you remain watchful. If Robert's court shifts, you could face envoys or assassins. Meanwhile, if the rumored threat in the north is real, we may all need alliances, no matter old grudges. May the gods keep you well. Ned Stark. Jon exhaled, passing it to Daenerys. She scanned it with a pensive frown. So King Robert's hostility is contained by Ned's counsel. But we should not rest on that. The Lannisters might try something covert. And the business about undead, it gnaws at me. If it's real, the entire world could be at stake. She brushed a stray silver lock from her face, voice subdued. We can't leave the freed confederation right now to chase rumors in the north. Yet ignoring it could be dire if winter truly brings horrors. Jon nodded gravely. We're pulled in two directions. Our vow to the freed confederation stands. But if the undead stir, even dragons might be needed to defend all living. Let's remain vigilant for further tidings. If it becomes certain, we might have no choice but to prepare. For now, we trust Ned Stark to keep Robert from striking us out of fear. They agreed to share Ned's letter with the freed councils, letting them know of potential infiltration threats from Westeros, encouraging them to watch for suspicious foreigners. But they decided not to alarm freed populations with talk of undead legends that might never materialize. Another layer of caution was added to freed city defenses. The days turned into weeks, then a month. Slavers Bay remained largely tranquil, freed commerce expanding. The freed vow linking Daenerys and Jon anchored the realm's morale. Dragons soared, freed thrived. The freed confederation's biggest challenges seemed to revolve around coordinating trade expansions, refining judicial codes, and quelling sporadic banditry. One evening, in the softly lit chamber that served as a private study, Daenerys and Jon shared a rare moment of respite. A clay lamp cast gentle shadows on the walls. Ghost lay curled near the door, half dozing. Drogon perched on a windowsill, letting out a contented croon whenever Daenerys moved. She reviewed a scroll from Astapor detailing a new freed militia formation. Jon flipped through a ledger about shipments from Yunkai. Occasionally, they glanced at each other, comforted by the shared presence. Outside, Meereen's nightlife buzzed with freed gatherings, music drifting from distant squares. Daenerys set her scroll aside. "It's quiet," she mused. "Almost too quiet. We've adapted to crisis after crisis. Now each day glides by with routine freed administration. I never imagined we'd see such peace so soon." Jon snorted softly. "I remember you said we'd always face a new threat. Perhaps we've earned a lull. Or perhaps the next threat lurks beyond the horizon." He set down the ledger. "But at least freed societies stand on firmer ground. If a day arrives when we must sail west or face an unknown menace, freed confederation might stand without us." She rose, moving to the window. The stars flickered, and the faint silhouette of Regal soared across the sky. Her voice was quiet when she spoke again. "Yes, they may. We gave them dragons once. Now they can fly on their own wings." She paused, turning to him, a tender seriousness in her gaze. "We are wedded by freed vow, guardians in spirit. If the day comes that we must face other realms or winter's shadows, we will do it together, come what may." Jon stood, crossing to her side. He brushed a gentle hand along her cheek. The hush between them felt as deep as the desert night. "Always together," he murmured. She pressed her lips to his in a soft kiss. Outside, the city's hum persisted, freed living their liberated dreams. Inside, the two Targaryens, once bastards, exiles, or overshadowed heirs, found a new home in each other's presence. Their vow bound not only them, but Slavers Bay's freed future. And though distant storms might gather, tonight, in the hush of Meereen's lamplit halls, they reveled in the improbable peace they had carved from the chaos of a world that once denied them everything.